So, the winter of 1939. This is when the Spanish Civil War enters its brutal final act. But this story, it's not just about the end of a military campaign. No, it's so much bigger. It's about an entire society just collapsing. It's a story of a desperate flight for survival and a nation that was literally forced into exile. So, to really get what happened, we're going to break it down. We're going to look at the anatomy of this complete and total collapse. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. First up, we'll look at the state of the Republican Army right after the disastrous Battle of the Ebro. Spoiler, it wasn't good. Then, we'll follow Franco's final offensive and the fall of Barcelona. After that, we're shifting gears to the massive human cost, the exodus they call La Retirada. And we'll wrap up by digging into what made the Catalan exile just so different, so unique in modern history. Okay, so to really get a handle on this collapse, we've got to rewind a little, back to the end of 1938. The Battle of the Ebro, the longest, bloodiest battle of the entire war, had just wrapped up. And man, it left the two armies in two completely different worlds. And the imbalance of power, it was absolutely staggering. On one side, you've got Franco's nationalist forces. They've got steady supplies coming in from Germany and Italy, so they rearmed right away. They're ready to go. But the Republican Army, they were just broken. They had thrown literally everything they had into the Battle of the Ebro, and they lost. So what were they left with? Exhausted soldiers, equipment that was falling apart, and morale that had hit rock bottom. The final offensive hadn't even kicked off yet, but honestly, the writing was already on the wall. You can just feel the desperation on the ground. Listen to this quote from a Republican commander, Manuel Tagueña. He said, "We were going to start the Battle of Catalonia with the weapons worn out in the Battle of the Ebro." Think about that for a second. It wasn't just that they were low on supplies. The very tools they had to fight with, their guns and cannons, were completely worn out. They were about to face a fresh, resupplied enemy with broken weapons. What chance did they have? So, with the Republican Army basically on its knees, Franco had a big strategic choice to make. Does he go for the capital, Madrid, or does he go for Catalonia, the Republic's industrial heartland? He chose Catalonia. He was aiming for a total knockout blow, one that the Republic could never, ever recover from. And the advance, it was just unbelievably fast. The whole thing kicks off right before Christmas 1938. By the middle of January, the key city of Tarragona is gone. Less than 2 weeks after that, Barcelona falls. From the very beginning to the very end, the entire campaign to conquer Catalonia took just over a month. This isn't just a list of dates, It's proof of how completely, how utterly the Republican defenses had just crumbled.
But here's a really crucial point. This wasn't some kind of brilliant, lightning-fast blitzkrieg. The victory wasn't won with a single genius maneuver. No, for the first couple of weeks, it was a slow, brutal, grinding battle. The nationalists just had more of everything. More soldiers, more planes, more artillery, you name it. And they just used that overwhelming weight to grind the defenders down day after day until the front line just shattered.
And once those front lines broke, it was like a domino effect, a chain reaction that led straight to the capital of Catalonia, Barcelona. But the story of the city's fall, well, it's defined as much by who wasn't there as by who was. And right in the middle of all this chaos, you get this incredible, almost heartbreaking moment of solidarity. You see, the international brigades, all those foreign volunteers who came to fight for the Republic, they'd already been officially withdrawn. For them, the war was supposed to be over. They were going home. But then they saw this disaster unfolding, and many of them, they just couldn't walk away. They picked up their weapons one last time in what they called the second effort. They knew they couldn't win. They were fighting a desperate rearguard action for one reason and one reason only, to buy a little more time for the civilians to escape. So when the capture of Barcelona finally happens on January 26th, it's an anticlimax. The nationalist troops just march into a ghost town. It was eerily quiet. Why? Because the government was gone, the army was gone, and hundreds of thousands of people were already on the roads fleeing north towards the French border. The great battle for the city? It never actually happened. Because the real story, the real struggle, had shifted. It was now a desperate fight for survival on the roads to France. And this is the point where the story really pivots. The military campaign is basically over, and now the human tragedy takes center stage. This massive exodus has a name in Spanish history, La Retirada, the retreat, and it was, without a doubt, one of the most sudden, desperate refugee crises of the entire 20th century. Just think about this number for a second. 500,000 people. 500,000. In the space of just a few weeks, a literal human tide of soldiers, civilians, men, women, and children poured over the Pyrenees Mountains, fleeing for their lives. And they were doing it in the dead of winter. I mean, the whole thing was so compressed, so chaotic. The window to actually get out was terrifyingly small. France opened the border to civilians on January 28th, then to soldiers a week later on February 5th. But just days after that, on February 13th, it was slammed shut. Anyone who hadn't made it across by then was trapped. But getting across the border wasn't salvation. For many, it was just another kind of hell. You see, the French authorities, they were expecting maybe 15,000 refugees. They were catastrophically unprepared for 500,000. So what happened? The refugees were disarmed, their families were split up, men separated from women and children, and they were herded onto these open beaches like at Argelès-sur-Mer and Saint-Cyprien, and just enclosed with barbed wire. There was no shelter, no sanitation, barely any food. And remember, this is the middle of winter. Disease spread like wildfire. Thousands died, right there on the frozen sand. But here's something we need to understand. This wasn't just a random group of refugees fleeing a war. The Fall of Catalonia created something very specific, something historically unique. It was, in so many ways, the flight of an entire nation.
So what made this exile so different? Well, a couple of things, really. First, it was a total institutional collapse. The entire government of Catalonia, the Generalitat, fled across the border. The whole state was effectively decapitated. And second, it was a massive cultural exodus. We're talking about almost the entire intellectual and artistic class, the leading writers, artists, academics, the people who were modern Catalan culture. And that meant their goal in exile wasn't just about personal survival. It was about preserving a whole national identity.
And there's this quote from Carles P. I Sunyer, who used to be the mayor of Barcelona, and it just sums it all up perfectly. He said, "In exile, Catalonia is above all the language." Think about that. Their land was gone, their government was gone, culture was all they had left. The Catalan language itself became their new homeland, and keeping it alive became their most important act of resistance. So yeah, the Fall of Catalonia was a crushing military defeat. It was an unbelievable humanitarian disaster. But the story of the exiles that came after, it poses this huge, profound question. What happens when a nation loses its territory, but just refuses to lose its identity? The Catalan exiles, they believed their nation could survive, held together not by borders on a map, but by the sheer force of cultural